been about 2 months since we had a podcast. First off, I had my knee replaced back in April, and I didn't feel up for doing a podcast for a while. And then when I did, all the guests I wanted to have on the podcast were all busy in May. So we're back here in June, ready to fire one up and have a great story to tell. On today's podcast, we have Paul Calloway and Brian Matix. Paul works for Miotech as a sales representative. Brian works for Schein. Both have been in the sports medicine sales business for over 30 years and great friends of a lot of athletic trainers around the country. They both started out at Medco and also were mentored by Jim Dickerson in his second career as a sales representative as well. They've got some great stories today. I think you'll find it interesting and a different perspective than the last podcast. And again, I really appreciate him coming on, kind of on some short notice as well. So let's go off the roll with Paul Calloway and Brian Matix. So welcome to Off the Roll. Very special podcast today. I'm with Paul Calloway from Miotech and Brian Matix from Schein, both great guys that have helped Ball State athletic training out for a long time now and really kind of part of our family. And so we're going to hear a little bit of their story on how they got started and doing what they're doing. And then we're going to hear some great athletic training stories from their perspective as we get through the podcast. So hi, Paul. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Troy.
Hi, Troy.
See ya.
So like I've started all these podcasts, I've asked these guests how they kind of got started in the athletic training profession. So Paul, I'm going to start with you. How did you get started in doing what you were doing?
Yeah, so I was a Ball State student, not actually in athletic training, but I was pursuing a history degree and a teaching degree. And I was attending church actually, and I ran into the former owner of Medco, and Medco used to be located right there in Muncie. So my wife actually started working part-time for Medco before I did. And then I just got to know them a little bit, and they had an opening in shipping and receiving. I was a student at Ball State looking for a little part-time gig. So I started working there. I guess it would have been probably late fall, like probably December of 1992, believe it or not. So I started working in shipping and receiving.
So I just missed you then because I was there the summer of 92.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I knew you had just been there because like some of the other people there, Susie Buck, I want to say, they knew you. Your name came up frequently around there.
Yeah, usually because stuff was screwed up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Orders screwed up. Everything. People were sending stuff back because
Right.
I had screwed it up and you had to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember a lot of the screw up stories, but everybody enjoyed your personality there. And I remember Susie talking about you and some of the other kind of mainstays at Medco. For those of you that don't know, Medco is located at 705 South Nichols, which was just south of campus. So a lot of times I would be like in that quad area where the Burkhart building and so forth is for history. And I would just walk over to Medco. It was that close. And in fact, there were a lot of times after Rex left and then Neil came, Neil was he'd be last minute on a couple things, and he'd call like Saturday morning, hey, Paul, is there any chance you could run over to the warehouse and meet me? I need to get a couple things for the game. And so I would literally like go open it up. Neil would grab a shopping cart like it was Walmart and just go around the shelves. And yeah, it was great. But it was a fun job. I started working there, working part-time until I graduated. And then when I graduated, they offered me a full-time job in marketing. So I had the history teaching thing I could do, or I could do this job that I'd really grown to love. And that was Medco Sports Medicine at the time. And so I decided to go ahead and take that opportunity. And here I am, 30 years later, I guess, almost.
Yeah. So Brian, how did you get started?
So interesting enough, my start started at the Medco facility in Muncie as well. My dad was an athletic director at Greenville High School and was purchasing, knew that I was basically at school, but looking for a job. When I got out, my dad was very insistent that I wasn't going the teaching route, teacher coach. And at that time, the market was flooded. So he said, look, this will give you maybe an opportunity to kind of get into the sales profession. That was really my background and my interest anyway. And so started with them. I was not there that long because school health had came knocking. It was an opportunity better suited for me at that time. And it was a management position that I took with them, and basically spent roughly about 10 years there. And then beyond that, then I went to Kramer, basically wet my beak. And that's probably where we got to know each other a lot better than even my time before. And then I was offered an opportunity from a gentleman in the Findlay, Ohio area about the hat. So this brings us back. So then I kind of stepped away from sports medicine at that time, and for a couple of years, and actually did the custom hat. They wanted to get into doing custom hats for schools, that sort of thing. And so I led a group there. Then off of that, Paul and I, obviously, even through this, being competitors, all this, I mean, we have a lot of years spent together.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, Brian, Impact Athletic was looking for a business manager to kind of direct tables, getting them out in that space. They really had background only in the football sector and strength and conditioning. And so at that point, I went to work for them. And then that led me a year ago to make a move. Henry Schein approached me about coming back into the distribution model. And that's where I reside right now. But essentially, I lose track of years, but when Paul says 30 some years, yes, it adds up. I like to still think that we're young at heart, but I love this profession that we serve. And the one of the main reasons why I wanted to be part of this was your involvement and Paul's, but really one of my strong mentors, which was JD.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, is that I think that that's kind of why I wanted to have you guys on the podcast, because we've had lots of JD stories from athletic trainers, but JD was more than that. And so having you two on, especially, and I know that he loved both of you very much. And so that was the whole unique thing about trying to do this, and kind of convey a little bit of how much I think we all impact each other outside of athletic training a little bit in that capacity. But so I mean, being sales reps for different companies and stuff. Well, first of all, let's go back to your Medco days, because Medco, we haven't really talked, I haven't really had a chance to talk about Medco a whole lot on the podcast, but Medco back then was really a mom and pop operation for the most part, with the Nottinghams originally. And then, and probably there's something before the Nottinghams that I don't know about that other people would, because it was obviously been there forever. And then there was this when the Nottinghams got tired of it, they decided to sell out to this group that JD was a part of. But I just remember being there. And so Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but in 92, the Nottinghams were still owning the Medco, correct? And at that time?
No, they had recently sold the business to Dan Brenneman and Jim Dickerson. And I think Jim and Dan acquired that business like in 91, something in that order.
Okay.
Sound right, Brian?
But there were still some Nottinghams that were working.
There were Nottinghams still.
The long hairs. The long hairs doing bids.
There was a fellow named Andy. He did their catalogs and so forth, and I started helping him.
I just remember coming in Monday sometimes, and those guys were like, they were doing bids, but they were still like recovering from the weekend of all the gigs that they were playing and stuff. And I remember going, Robert, my gosh.
The two Nottingham, for sure. But, in answer to your question, though, so I did a little research while I was there, because I'm into this history thing, right? And I have always been, and I started asking questions. So Medco, they started like in 1955, right there in Muncie, servicing doctors. But they didn't get into athletic training until like the late 70s. It was actually, if some of you guys know Steve Reisinger, Doc Reisinger,
Yeah.
he had met the owner at that time. His name was Ed Smith. He had met Ed and developed a relationship with Ed some way, somehow, and convinced Ed to add Kramer. And so they started selling Kramer sports medicine products out of there. And no, you know what? I think it may have actually been Mueller. I think they added Mueller, but
Yeah.
that was when they first got opened in the late 70s as an actual sports medicine dealer. And then they were just a small, as you said, mom and pop operation until, the business was eventually sold in 1998 to a kind of a conglomerate out east. And that's when they really blew up. But before that, they were tiny, one of the smallest players in the industry, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was some definite, I mean, we had, and what the thing about it is like what you talked about, Paul, was there's some personalities that were at Medco. You had Ray, God bless him. Ray was a hard worker, but he was going to.
Ray couldn't read. Did you know that? He couldn't read or write.
No.
So he was the best picker we had in that warehouse. And
yeah,
Ryan, you probably remember that. That guy was money. When he picked an order and he put his initials on it, that thing was gold.
Yeah.
But he couldn't read. He would recognize numbers on the shelves and he would compare them to his sheet. And eventually he learned over time where everything was. But he was this 70-some-year-old gentleman. He kind of had a little bit of a rough life. I mean, he'd worked in warehouses and stuff his whole life. He had not had a professional career. But he was just a great guy to have around. I learned so much from him. He was
Yeah, you're right. Very dependable with that. Yeah. Yeah, probably way more dependable than the summertime help for sure. And then we had, and I'm just thinking of obviously after I graduated and left, I mean, but you had sales reps like Ira Hall. Who else besides? There's Ira. There was
Dick Sandburn was another
yes.
one.
Yes.
Yeah. He was located in central Indiana, traveled, I think, part of Ohio and Indiana for Medco.
Right.
That was another one of the originals.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
then,
you got
Boyd Hazley. Boyd was kind of
Boyd. Yep.
I don't know what he had been done professionally. Maybe Brian remembers, but then in retirement, he came in and kind of worked the phones for us and did basically outbound sales calling.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's still amazing to me that the amount of again, the small size of the company, but yet the amount of volume that they did was logistically was amazing. I mean, it's very interesting to me how all that stuff got done. Because you would go and people would, it was, alert services, school health, Medco. I mean, this is, 30 years ago. That was, I'm trying to think of it. Was there any other players that were in there?
Probably microbiomedics, which is
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Seneca was another one. There was a few around.
Yeah. Well, thinking about it, when you said that, and then talking about the Smiths, that was my connection. And just how the times have changed. My dad, Ed, used to come over and bring basically a station wagon and drop off his supplies, and how the market has changed over the years now. But, we still do some of that personal touch, but that in particular was really, I thought, intriguing, because you're going out there and really servicing the customer, and you get a chance to catch up and chat. And really that plays into the mentors we've had along the way, like the JDs of the world. That's how they got the product placed. There weren't, the internet was not as big in terms of being able to see all the selections out there and different products. You literally had to go out there and show somebody a roll of tape or, flexi wrap when it came out new, those type of products. So I think that was the kind of the changing moment. I'm not saying we don't do that to a certain extent now, but there's a lot more stuff that you can gather, where in the olden days you had to go out there and physically show.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I think COVID unfortunately changed a lot of that, and this younger generation doesn't understand, and not for good or bad. They just don't understand that you can't get, if I'm in a bind and I'm at such and such a place and I need something for one of my student athletes like tomorrow or that tonight for that matter, you're not going to get that level of service from the internet. You're going to get that from a person, because they can make things happen in that capacity. And I remember 2019, we're in Hawaii, and I got a kid that's cramping up in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're flying straight to Hawaii. And I get a hold of Brian Ross, and I said, Brian, I know we still have a blanket order. Can you send me a box of Gator lights? All I need is one box. And he's like, yeah, no problem. It'll be out tomorrow morning. And by the time that afternoon in Hawaii, there was a box of Gator lights at the front desk for me. I mean, that's the type. Now, I think the shipping charges for that box of Gator lights was like 3 times what the box cost. But Sean and Neil said, go for it. You need it, go. But that's where you just can't get that just from ordering stuff off the internet. You can't. It's not there. And it's I think those are the things that from our standpoint are still, from us, I guess, older guys, are still very important. I know I've watched our younger staff, like, we got to do this, and how do we get this supply and stuff. I'm like, just call them up, call these people up, see if they'll help you out, drop them a text, whatever. More than likely they're going to make stuff happen. And I think that's the learning process that they're going through right now, because this age doesn't support that. It's about just point and click, and we all do it, but there's still a level of what we need service wise out there that you guys provide that is still a little bit of old school that goes along with that. So,
your point there, Troy, I've been doing these trade shows a long time. I've yet to see Amazon support one of these meetings. I've yet to see Amazon show up and install tables or put together an electrotherapy unit or train you how to use it or do those things. So, the relationships do matter, and I hope they continue to matter for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you this, and then we're going to get some other stories. So, obviously you cross paths at trade shows and stuff, but have you ever showed up at the same school at the same time?
Yes. I remember that happened at Anderson University. Matix there walked in. I'm having a meeting there with Reisinger, and in walks Mad Dog. And we laughed, and we all went to lunch together.
I know. Exactly. No.
Yeah.
I would mark that on the book. That is one of those classic ones that we're always going to remember. And, look, the way I look at it, we're still friends, and we got to know each other through this market. But I think that just shows you that level of, some people feel offended, whatever. Paul and I are friends. Like, nothing's that somebody says out in the field is going to interrupt that relationship that I have. He knows that if he wins it, he's going to earn it in the same way. And I think that's where customers are at. They want to support people. Like, we're not going to nitpick about that. And sometimes people get petty about those things, but I'm just speaking here is that that's something that I want to reinforce, that, there's a lot of business out there. We go out there, we do our job, and I want to be able to sleep at night. Like, I'm not going to be able to pull up a skeleton to make somebody do something. That's not what I do. I want to earn their business, support them the same way Paul supports his customers.
Yeah. So. No, and I think that's the thing that we struggle with that too, because you guys are our friends, and gosh, like I said before, when we were putting that Shondell facility together, and they said I said, well, what about costs? And they're like, no, don't worry about it. Just get what you want. And I went, great. Then I can get a little bit from Paul, and I can get a little bit from Sean Parrish, and I can get a little bit, from Brian, and it's the one time I got to help everybody out that wasn't part of a bid process, that wasn't part of this, because that's really what we want to do. But when we go through the bid process, obviously it's out of our hands at one point. We put that stuff out there, but it's in purchasing's hands at that point. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And it's hard. It's really hard. So you try to figure out a way to balance that out. And I think over the years, we've tried to do that as much as possible. But sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. And so I think, you guys understand that because it's obviously the process that it's in. But I think, Brian, you're the one that told me is that, when you have those opportunities, just think about, we can't do this bid with you, but we can do X, Y, and Z down the line. And I think that we've always tried to do that with you guys on that. And I think a lot of athlete trainers do that, Yeah. So,
but just like you guys are adversaries of Toledo or Kent State or whatever, but you're also professional friends with those folks.
Right.
And I was at the Ohio Athletic Trainers meeting a few weeks ago. Brian actually, his flight got delayed, so he wasn't able to join us there. But I'm sitting there at the bar with Mandy from Medco and Mike Klein from School Health, and we're talking for 2 hours and trying to text Brian. He's on an airplane or something somewhere. We're all friends. We all get along well. And as the joke goes, we're probably going to all work together someday anyway.
That's right. Well, I think to that point, what you said, Troy, like, that's one thing that I have seen. Some people say, well, it's out of my control, but it's, again, what I've learned from JD over the years and just different mentors. Like Paul and I, all we want is a fair opportunity. But what we don't like I'll speak for myself, and Paul can agree or disagree on this. The one thing that, like, the bid, defining what a bid is. Some people are looking, like, they understand we're not in business just to give away things. There is a cost of doing business, especially post-COVID now. Like, things have gone up and it's not really anything we can necessarily control. We can give you options, but it's understanding there is a mechanism here, and a widget might cost this or that. We're in a partnership with you. We feel entrusted, like you've given us this opportunity. We're going to do our very best to deliver those products or give you the news that you might not want to hear, but at least you're hearing something from us. And I know Paul believes in that as well as I do. Like, sometimes we have to give you those difficult answers, even though we want to provide you with something. When you're a distributor and not a manufacturer of product, you run into that problem. So, it's just communication, I think, at the end of the day. And I've told, I don't know how many classes or just different athletic trainers along the way, is treat people how you would like to be treated. Like, if you do things and it's not I's dotted and T's crossed, we can't read minds. We can do a lot of things, but it's just the detail. Details matter, Yeah.
No, and I think the thing that goes into this relationship too is that, we trust when you guys bring us something, we trust the fact that if you're telling us about it, that you guys believe in it too, and you think that it can help us. And so that's why you're bringing it to us. At the same time, hopefully we give you feedback, whether it's good or bad, like, this is a great product. Everybody needs one of these, or it kind of sucked. Even though you got the product testing out there by the companies and stuff, sometimes you need some real world feedback as well. And I think that's where the give and take of the relationship really benefits. Whereas if I didn't know you guys, I might hold back a little bit on what I feel about a product or something like that. And we've all had those conversations. Or when Paul has to, deliver the bad news that there's no more septic swabs, which is that was like the worst day of my life, because I went right out to the stadium and there was like a package out there, and they're in my desk right now because I'm hoarding that stuff for that. But I mean, that's the thing about it, is that you can be honest with us and we're going to go, okay. Or, hey, is there any alternatives out there on the horizon and stuff? I mean, we all, when J&J went up sky high, you guys were the first ones to say, hey, this is going to happen. Be on the lookout, prepare accordingly. which all helps us out as athletic trainers to do that. And that's the thing where I think that's why the relationships work, because it is a true relationship. It's friendship. It's how you, like you said, you'd want to be treated if we were all together, rather than, unfortunately, if you've got some athletic trainers just out on an island that don't have those relationships, and then they get frustrated because they're like, why didn't I know about this? Or why didn't I know about this? And you're trying to help as many people as you possibly can too, but there's some give and take that goes along with that. So, yeah. So before we get to the JD stuff, are there any athletic trainer stories out there that you've been on the road for now almost 30 years, or you've been out there doing stuff? Any athletic trainer stories that you guys want to share, that you've been like, you walked out of the athletic trainer and went, holy smokes, what did I walk into? How did I get out of this one? What am I going to do about this?
Well, I mean, that's day-to-day living in this industry.
Yeah. I'm not sure that we have long enough time on this podcast, and I'm not sure that we want to incriminate those folks that might have asked those questions.
Yeah.
I would say this: there's some crazy stories, and have we been in situations where things have like, what am I doing here, or whatever? Like I would say those cases have been out there, but from my perspective, it's just a bond that you create over that time. If they feel comfortable allowing some of their laundry to be shared in front, which for some people, they'd run down the street and talk about it. That's not what I do. And so, I feel like, I'm part of that group, whether it be Ball State, whether it be, the MAC schools. Can't say, like, I'm not gonna run out and tell everybody about it. That's their business, and I would probably say in that regard, I've had a lot of laughs with a lot of people over the years, but I would say it's more or less like travel, or when you get into going to these conference meetings or NATA, that's where, you really have some good times. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And, a lot of the stories that I would tell wouldn't mean a whole lot to your average listener, just because they weren't there in that moment. I mean, I think I don't know if you guys know Dave Grossman. I think Brian does. But the time I met Dave Grossman, he called into Medco because we had shipped an order of dumbbells out to him in Southwest Missouri State or something like that. He was at a lot of different places, so I might have that right. But he got them, and they're like, they showed up. They're all in a box. Obviously, they're, back then, all these dumbbells were cast iron spray painted, and they're just all in a box, and they're dinged up and paint scraped off and whatever, just not packed very well. So he called, and he was hot. He wanted to talk with somebody, and I got Dave on the phone, and I said, well, that sucks. I can't believe we did that. We need to fix that for you. And I think he was ready for a fight, and he wasn't getting one because I agreed, And then, so Dave and I are still friends to this day. That must have been 1994. And that moment, he's like, he thought he was going to have to argue with some jackball customer service agent that didn't care. But what he ran into was somebody that actually did care. And, I hated that he got him that way, and I wanted to fix it for him. And a lot of my stories would be stories like that, where we got something done for somebody, and I'm super proud of that. So I remember that and those relationships.
I know for a fact, Paul, that you would come on calls and you would end up at the Rot. So, I mean, you come to Ball State on sales calls, but you and Neil would end up at the Rot with cigars and beers.
And count. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And me feeding Doc's dog under the table.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
We had just some famous times over there for sure. Anytime with Neil's, time well spent.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna have a podcast with just Neil here probably sooner than later. And I know Rex, when I saw Rex this past weekend at the track, he was like, I thought we were doing a podcast. And I'm like, I ran out, it's been crazy with my knee replacement and stuff. And Tony wasn't going to be here. So we'll catch up somewhere out down the line, but I really want to get individual podcasts with all of them before I kind of bring them all back together a little bit. But that's, again, that's how I got to know a lot of people, was people like Rex and Neil and Tony introducing me as a student to these different sales reps and stuff like that. You need to go talk to this person, or you need to go talk to that person. And getting to know them as students, and then developing those relationships over the years and stuff. So, okay, so we'll get to the good part now. So Jim Dickerson, obviously a major influence on all three of our lives with that. But Jim was very unique because, and you guys know this, but I'm kind of, for our audience to understand, Jim, we've had lots of Jim Dickerson stories already on here. Jim was the first athletic training student at Ball State. He was the co-head athletic trainer for Ron Sindri at one time, was the program director, and then left Ball State to go and work for Kramer. And that kind of started his sales kind of profession or career. And, the thing about, obviously we know about JD, was that he could pretty much talk his way in or out of anything that could possibly come up. And a lot of it involved humor. So without spoiling the whole thing, talk to me about the first time that you guys met JD. I don't care. Paul, Brian, go, whatever you want to do.
Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
Well, when I met JD, he was essentially in the kind of the position I'm in now. So he was the vice president of sales and marketing at Medco. And he had an office up there at the front of that building at 705 South Nichols. And, at this time, he's probably not a lot older than I am now, and he was funny. He would come back to the warehouse where I was working at the time in 1993, 94. And he would work all day up in that office, or maybe go make sales calls. And he'd come into the warehouse because, in summer you have to, pack orders at night and stuff. And he would put on a pair of shorts. I remember he would put a towel in one of his pockets and scissors in his pocket, which he was used to doing, obviously, probably for decades. And he would come back and he would regale all of us warehouse rats, which, Troy, you were one of them at one point, with just these athletic training stories. And, it's like somebody would hold up a widget, and it's like, JD, what's this? And he would start a story. And he was just so funny. I just enjoyed him, and I got really interested in the products because he just, he really cared about that industry, and he really cared how things worked. And it's just one product after another. It's like, JD, why do they call this an oral screw? And I think they changed it since then. But and so he just would walk us through this stuff, and as you can imagine, it's something like an oral screw. JD had stories to tell. Yeah. So that's how I got to know JD, and then I started working trade shows with JD. So I went from warehouse to marketing and into sales. So there I am at one of these early trade shows. I think we're in Chicago. And if you ever go to a trade show in Chicago as an exhibitor, you can't lift a bag of nuts without having, to pay somebody, some union worker, $75 to do it. So we're there, and we've got one of these tabletop displays that has lights that you screw in. And we put our trade show booth up like the late afternoon. We're going to go have dinner, and then the next morning the trade show starts. Well, we put our trade show booth up, we plug it in, and one of the lights is out. JD's like, well, crap, we got to get a light bulb. So he goes over to, the booth where you can get that kind of stuff, and they quote him like $75 for a light bulb. And he's like, well, hell with that, So anyway, we end up going back to the room, and I get up the next morning and get cleaned up and whatever, and go down to the booth. I don't really think of it. We have a good day at the show. What I didn't really notice was that light bulb had gotten fixed, and I didn't really know how it got fixed. So I go back up to the room that night because it's a 2-day show. And I'm wanting to read something, emails or whatever, but I lean over and I hit the switch on the light bulb, and it doesn't work. It doesn't turn on. I looked at it like, JD, there's no light bulb in here. And he's like, you're damn right there's not. That's a classic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that dude was a road warrior. You'd be out traveling with this guy, and he's like, oh, God, we got to stop here. I know this place is a great place. It's got pie. and he would just stop at JD. He was a riot to travel with. He was so much fun. He knew so many people in and out of athletic training and places to go and things to do. And he was
Yeah. How about you, Brian?
Wow. Paul kept it pretty clean. I thought he was going McDonald's.
Oh no, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're gonna get there. This is just the opening. This is the warm up act.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So all the great things, right? All the great things, right? So for me, it was really his impact really has touched me in terms of shaping me as a young, didn't know what I was doing coming out of school, thought I knew everything. And just mentoring me, whether he knew that at the time when he was at Kramer, just he and Frank Freeman, those were some guys that really took it next level. I mean, these are guys that I respected because they had a care in what they were trying to deliver, but they also had the experience behind them to say, look, this is the way you detail a product. Like he held court, like for Paul and that group at Medco. That's the way I saw him in action and how he could like turn an audience, a room to get the attention, to get the right information out there and throw in a couple one-liners all the time to bring things full circle. I'm not, clearly I might be funny to some people. I don't consider myself to be funny. He is one of those guys that had that knack of being able to go in a room and being able to do both. And I think that's what I hold him to, because the market that I've spent my whole career in, even that hat layoff time was really, it's still the same thing. It was still dealing with schools and things of that nature. Athletic training has meant a lot to me, and the value of him coming out of that profession. Not every athletic trainer can go in sales, but he was one of those rare guys that took that and morphed it in and made it something. And that's, to me, he's got a place with me all the time. I'm gonna, because I hold a lot of my success due to him and the way he did things. I try to emulate even today. There's things that I probably do just out of habit, and I'm sure can all attest to those things. So that for me is, just the one-liners. If I think, I'm not a good joke teller, but there was never a moment, like he'd stick his hand out and hey, did you feel that? Just like random things, those are the things that
was his wart joke you talking about.
Oh yeah.
His wart. Exactly. I got my wart.
Yeah. Just and really how he not only, because back then there were a lot more coaches and ADs handling general first aid care. There weren't the athletic trainers there. We would have liked to have seen them. So that evolution in itself, just teaching some of those people just basic skills, to help them and help their program. So I've always taken time to do that, get an AD and show him a quick ankle tape job, because he's the basketball coach and probably the baseball coach too. So
I think the thing that always got me about Jim was the amount of people that he knew that were not necessarily athletic trainers, like you just talked about, Brian. I would ask him, I forget, one time we were talking about something, a region of Indiana. That's what we were talking about. And he's like, oh, well, so-and-so is the head basketball coach boys basketball coach at that school. And this so-and-so is the AD at this school. And this person over here, if you were down there, I'd tell him to stop by and see. And then he would throw in like, hey, you need to go to this restaurant here or something. He had an incredible retention of where people were at, and not like he seemed to know even changes. It would be hard now because everything changes so fast, but he usually knew where somebody was or what they were doing or any of that stuff. And I was always amazed that the amount of people that he knew, or the people that you would run into, and you would say, I would say, hey, I'm an assistant athlete trainer at Indiana State, but I went to Ball State. Oh, do you know Jim Dickerson? You know, even some of our students were just amazed by that, and just the amount of just people that knew and loved Jim. It's always amazing to me. I mean, my junior leader sponsors in Boone County was Carol's brother-in-law, the Kellens, and so when I told them that I was going to Ball State, they're like, "Well, you gotta go see my cousin. You gotta go see my brother-in-law." And I went, "Who's your brother-in-law?" And they're like, "Oh, it's Jim Dickerson." And I was always amazed by the amount of people that he knew, and people that knew him, and even just hearing the stories. Even Otho, when I was with the Eagles in that summer, he had 2 or 3 JD stories that he just would chuckle about, with that. And there was one time there was something about a canoe in his bar. I'm not sure. Hoover was involved with it too. That sounds like they were up in this canoe. They'd gotten into this canoe, and they were Otho, Hoover, and JD are in there paddling this canoe with no water. Right. I'm sure there was other stuff involved with that too. Yeah, in their younger days. But Otho loved. He just laughed about it. I mean, he thought it's just one of those things where, and then JD had stories about, Otho had this. When he was at Kent State, had this palm tree in his office. And when JD got there, he's like, "What the heck is this? Why do I have a palm tree in my office?" I also wanted it. So there was some back and forth on that too. So, that's the thing. It just always amazed me about the amount of people that he connected with. So, yeah. So what, we kind of shared kind of how, inspiration wise and stuff, but you guys got to have a favorite Jim Dickerson story. What is your experience, your favorite Jim Dickerson story? I mean, I've got a couple, that don't necessarily involve me, but he told them to me, and I'll never forget. In fact, I throw them out every now and then for pure shock value sometimes with some student athletes. So I don't care which. Go.
I've got a couple before we get to the story. I'm not sure how I'm going to tell that one later. I got to figure that one out. But one story I will tell. 1996 Orlando. We went to the NATA, and at that point, Jim was working for Active Athlete, and so he's working for a competitor of ours. And I kind of got to sneak away from the booth, because I'm working at Medco, just to say hi to JD, and there was some animosity there a long time ago between JD and the other owner, and so that's why I kind of had to sneak out of there. So anyway, it really wasn't between JD; it was between the owner and JD, if you get what I'm saying. But I would just want to see JD because I just loved him. And so 1996, Don Joy is having a tape contest, a tape off at their booth, and so there's all these young athletic trainers that want to see how, if they can beat the time. And I can't remember what the time was. It was like, the time to beat was like 2 minutes and 10 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't miss this booth in the exhibit hall, because there was all these people there. And we're just walking around the exhibit hall, and we run into there. And of course, half the people there know JD, and he's there, and he pulls out his chapstick. You guys remember the chapstick? He always has it. He's just telling stories here in the background where people are taping off. And I'm telling you, most of these tape jobs coming out of there, they had more wrinkles than a French bulldog. But there's JD, so he's telling stories, and then pretty soon I'm like, "Hey JD, you should do that." And he's, "Nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that chapstick again." And then one of his friends, somebody else, "Hey JD, you've got to do that. Come on, get in there. So JD, he says, "All right, I'll do it, chapstick." And he goes up there, and he they start the timer. Well, JD is not even like doing anything. He's just like taking his time, and he's gesturing around to people. He's talking. He's telling some of his silly jokes. Somebody asked him if Carol's with him, and he says, "Of course, Carol's with me. I didn't want to have to kiss her goodbye." He's just telling all these stories.
Yeah.
And pretty soon we look down, and JD's done. It's this perfect tape job that there's no wrinkles. It's just money, and he beats the best time by like 11 seconds. And the whole place just erupts laughing because that's JD. He was hilarious. He was so friendly, and he was so good at what he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Brian, you got one, Brian, or you got another one?
No, I mean, mine are a lot like yours, Troy. I mean, I would say, because it's going to lead into Paul if you're going to launch the bathroom thing, but he also was a great mentor in terms of just the travel routine. When you're a road warrior like we've been over the years, there's a couple things that are very important. Number one, bathrooms. well, let me rephrase. No, let me rephrase. A good place to get a good beverage, right?
Yeah.
Good food, but then the bathroom on the back end. Because what you don't want to do is be in a random spot or out in a cornfield or at a McDonald's, etc. So I'll just roll. Like he taught me a lot of those things. So I take pride in like knowing that and going back to like all those touch points. Those also included facilities too. Okay. So I'll kind of caveat
that's
that.
quite a lead in.
Yeah.
So I have another story to tell before we get to that. So JD and I was telling you, we traveled a lot together, and we have to attend. This is after he came back to Medco. Medco's now under new ownership.
Right.
Paul DiMartinez might mean some things to some people.
Yeah.
Paul's our new boss for both of us, and JD and I, we're splitting our sales territory. So he's got everything from Indianapolis South, Ohio, Kentucky. I've got everything from Indianapolis North plus Illinois and Michigan. That's our sales territory. But for some reason, Paul DiMartinez decides that we need to cover District 3, the meeting. So that's down there in like Georgia, South,
right,
that sort of thing. So the meeting that year is in Greenville, South Carolina. All right, we get our tickets in the mail. That was back then when you would have someone, actually get you a paper ticket. People,
right.
They aren't going to really understand that, but you would get a paper ticket, and they had someone at Medco that did that. So JD and I both, separately in our own homes, we got that ticket hanging on our refrigerator from a magnet for a month, and it says it right on there, Greenville, South Carolina. Well, so we travel down to Indianapolis together to get on the airplane to go to that meeting, and we know where we're going, and then they come over to the loudspeaker on the airplane. They tell us where we're going and everything, and JD and I, we're just having a good time. So we get down there. The trade show's the next morning, and it's about 8:30 at night, and so we're gonna catch a shuttle to the hotel. And so I'm looking at the shuttles, and we're staying at the show is at like a Hyatt, and looking at the hotel board. Some of you guys may not even know that, but they used to have hotel boards at the airport, and then you could pick up a phone and call the different hotel and ask for a shuttle. I'm like, JD, I don't see the Hyatt. Where's the Hyatt? And he's like looking over there, like, what the heck's going on here? And we're trying to figure it out, and we're checking, and then like it screams out at me. I'm looking at the board, and right in the middle is the address, and we're in Greensboro, North Carolina. They sent us to Greensboro, North Carolina, not Greenville, South Carolina. We're 3 hours away. It's 8:30 at night. So JD and I, we're just so disgusted and pissing and moaning, like, how the hell did this happen? Well, we rented a car, and we drove 3 hours through the night to get to Greenville, South Carolina for the show.
Who had to answer for that one?
I don't know. It's amazing because we both had the tickets hanging from our refrigerators. They both said Greensboro. How we didn't connect at Greenville, South Carolina. Whoever put the tickets together for us in New York messed that up, and hope she didn't lose her job or anything. we laughed a long time about that.
Oh yeah, because I'm sure that was an interesting drive at night. When's the district? Go ahead.
Probably 190 miles. So
yeah,
it's about a 3-hour drive. I found that out that night. So. anyway, that's
And you had to be at the trade show at what time that morning?
like 7 a.m. I mean, we were not
Yeah.
we were not in any condition to smile and wave, but of course that's what you do, so we did.
That's oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And he was he driving then, or did you drive for him, or?
I think JD drove. A lot of times he wanted to drive. Anytime that you were with JD, I'll pick you up. Because
Right.
he liked to be behind the wheel. And he taught me a lot about that. Like, you're traveling in a snowstorm, you got to go 4 hours. You know, you get behind that tractor trailer and you stay right on their taillights because you know they're not going to slow down faster than you.
Right.
Stay right on them. And I learned a lot of little tips and tricks to staying alive out there on the roads. And yeah, he knew how to do it. Yeah, whole other skill set he had.
You know, the thing is that I wish, you know, the thing about it is that the thing that a lot of people don't know about Jim is that he was one of 4 brothers, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And those brothers obviously, you know, they made their own mark in the world too. I mean, obviously Myron winning a couple of state championships and stuff. So I think, you know, that I've always wondered that part of his personality was survival. You know, he had to figure out how to stand out among 4 brothers and work on the farm and figure that out a little bit to do that. And where everybody's a little bit different in that, you know, trying to survive in that family. I think that's one of the interesting part about it. That for him, he had to be the funny one, most likely, right? to survive in that deal. And again, I think that just the time and age of everything too. So yeah. So here's my story, and this may have been told before, but I think you guys know this story, but I throw this one out every now and then because we still have, believe it or not, we have some kids that still get taped for the first time, that don't really know what's about it and stuff. And so the story he told was when he was at Maine that he had this freshman football player that came in and got his ankles taped for the first time during 2-a-days. And then he said he didn't see him again until Friday. He goes, hey doc, my ankles are starting to itch and they kind of smell bad and stuff. And he goes, he goes, and I didn't see this kid the rest of the time, so I figured he didn't like it, so he just cut the tape off and moved on. And yet he comes in the athletic training with that tape on there that I taped him on Monday on Friday. And I said, my God, you got to cut that off every time. What the hell? He goes, well, I thought they were just supposed to stay on. And he goes, that poor kid had a bad rash. I mean, he was hating life. And he goes, it smelled, it was horrible. So I always tell the freshmen that the first time they get taped, I always have to remind them, like, hey, you got to cut that off at the end of practice. I don't want you wearing that a whole week with that. Yeah. So
yeah, I heard him tell that story too.
Oh yeah.
I honestly think he was a great clinician too.
Yeah.
I really do. You know, I heard him tell a lot of stories over the years. I'm sitting there in the background. Nobody would notice me because there's JD, and he commanded such respect in the room. I remember one time he told me like the worst injury he ever dealt with is someone got impaled at Ball State at a track meet by a javelin.
Yeah,
and he dealt with that, and then that's significant. So, but I think he was truly a great clinician.
Yeah, Ron had alluded to that too a little bit. That you know, he, for all everybody kind of remembers JD's humor and stories and jokes and all that stuff, but from the standpoint of a clinician standpoint, he was very sharp. And again, he got that from Bud. Bud, you know, we've heard these stories from these guys that, you know, Glenn Snow and Ron Sindri and Ron O'Neill and stuff, that Bud was just extremely attention to detail, like to the point where you had to know it or he was going to kick you out of class. Basically, that's what Ron O'Neill talked about in his podcast, was that you had to know that stuff or you weren't going to be in Bud Miller's class for very long. And I think that was the thing about it, is that it just honed their clinical skills to where he was very, very good. But but he'd also be the first one to, like the kid that Ron talked about, they got the cigarette burned on it above his belly button. He would turn that into something something that he would mess with people on for sure. He was going to mess with you if that's the case. I mean, and that was always a great thing too, because I think that alluded to Rex when Rex was a student, and still having fun and not taking ourselves so seriously that we couldn't have fun and do that. I mean, that's his legacy at Ball State as much as anything, is that he was pulling pranks and doing stuff and trying to make sure that we weren't, it wasn't going to be a stressful environment. As stressful as it wasn't going to be so stressful that we couldn't do our jobs. And I think that probably translated over with you guys too. I mean, did you guys ever see him pull any pranks on you guys or anybody else?
Oh yeah.
Pranks. Well, yeah, there was pranking going on in the office and so forth. He was always having good fun, sort of at people's expense. I remember that Boyd Hazley, that we talked about earlier. He was one of these old school sales reps that had been in the field, and now he was kind of working the phones for us. And he knew some of the guys locally there at in the Muncie community. So I remember one time Boyd would do a lot of deliveries for us, and we were getting ready to paint the inside of our office there at Medco 705 South Nichols. If any of you guys had ever been in there, that building needed some help, and it certainly does now. But we were getting ready to do some painting, and we had bought like 4 cans of paint, and it came in a box of carton. Well, they sat it on the bench there, right there when you first walked into Medco, and then right beside it was this order that had to go like to Muncie North. Well, Boyd Hazley grabbed the paint and delivered it instead of the order to Muncie North. And so, boy, yeah, JD razzed Boyd like you wouldn't believe. It was the funniest thing. Yeah, I think he gave him an award for best paint salesman there at Medco.
Well, he's the one that showed me one day when I was a student. He came in the office there, and he showed me how you could take the phone cord out of the receiver and just let it sit there. So then he would go to another phone and dial the number. So that person, usually Neil or Tony or somebody like that. So when you picked up the phone, the cord would come out, and they'd be sitting there going, hello, hello, hello. And he would laugh. He thought that was his little deal to mess, or a student. He would do it. He would really want to do it to a student if he could get away with it, just to mess with the student. Yeah.
He would hold court like every Monday. He would get like, I think it was Ron O'Neill was one of the guys, but some of the people he knew around the industry, and he would call them, and tell them jokes, and just like, all right, it's Monday. I got to call Ron. Right. I got this joke. And once in a while, I'd have a joke for JD because you had to have something to give back to him. Then hey, Calloway, that joke that you told me earlier, you got to tell Ron.
Oh my God.
That's how he did his calls. I don't know if he ever actually did a lot of selling per se, because he was always selling, and he didn't really features and benefits of Gauze Pad. He won you over, different way.
Awesome. Well, we're about an hour into this, so I think we're probably ready for the McDonald's story, Paul. So you can tell it in any version you want to. It's fine. It's famous amongst us, but this is ready to be on the record here with this. So here you go.
Okay, well, Carol, if you do listen to this, I apologize. So I used to travel with JD and a lot, and there was one time we went to University of Toledo together, and so we made some sales calls that day. We went and saw Brian Jones at University of Toledo, and there was a game that night. So JD and I got tickets. I think Brian was kind enough to get us some tickets. We had pretty good seats. And so we go to that game, and I think we were home versus Ball State. Jason Hines might have some of those details, but we're home. Or we're at home at Toledo versus whoever we're at home with, and the crowd was really giving Jason just a super hard time. He's the assistant under Brian Jones at that time. You guys know Jason's got the bright red hair, and the crowd was just giving him a hard time just for fun. But we had a great evening. Watched Toledo win that game. Saw Brian Jones and talked with him a little bit before and after the game. And then we spent the night there in the hotel, and then we had a bunch of calls scheduled the next morning to go on. So, and I'll never forget JD. He decides that he wants to go get pancakes that morning. All the time I had traveled with JD in all my years, I never remember him specifically wanting pancakes, but that morning JD wanted pancakes. So we went and we got them. And then he's got an appointment that morning. And again, Jason, he might even be able to tell you the name of the high school, but it's one of the Toledo big schools. And JD, we walk into the athletic director's meeting, and he knows this athletic director. He's probably known this guy, 200 years. And they just, I sit there and I just listen to these two guys talk back and forth, and they're just having a big time. And, I'm 26 years old or something at this time. And I'm just like, oh, this is funny. And just enjoying the moment. Well, I'd been with a JD long enough to just kind of recognize when JD was starting to feel uncomfortable, and he just got fidgety. And so it's like, what's going on with JD over here? I didn't say anything, but I could tell like he was getting fidgety. So we leave the athletic director's office. We got another appointment in about an hour down the road at another high school. And, we're walking down the school hallway, and JD, like, he's taking these quick steps, and we call it the quick step, actually. And then he tells me, he's like, I got to take a dump. I'm like, wow, okay. Well, I wonder if there was something going on. There's a bathroom right here. He says, no, I don't want to go in the boys' room. I saw a McDonald's right up here when we came in. So we're just going to stop at this McDonald's on the way out. I'm fine. So we get in the car, and it's JD's like Lincoln Continental or whatever he's driving at the time. And, he scoots his seat up, close to the steering wheel, and he's driving. And it turns out that McDonald's was a lot farther than what JD had thought. So he thought it, he kind of remembered it in his mind's eye being a couple minutes away, but it's more like 12 to 15 minutes away.
Oh my gosh.
And so the whole time, JD, he's getting nervous, and he's white knuckled, and he's, you could tell he was really struggling because some of the young people on this may not understand, but as you get older, you can't trust the gaskets and seals as well.
Yeah.
So he was struggling. Well, we go into that McDonald's, and I'm telling you, he didn't even slow down to make the turn. We must have hit that 35 miles parking lot, and he's basically got the door open, and he's got one foot out the door before the car even comes to a rest. And he's like, turns the car off, throws me the keys, and he's like, again, the quick step, into the McDonald's. I'm like, well, see, this is where I didn't understand, because I was 25 years old and I didn't really understand that he wasn't going to take a lot of time, but I'm thinking he's going to be in there a while, right? So anyway, he goes in there, and I thought, well, I could use a cup of coffee. So I go into the McDonald's, and I get the cup of coffee ordered, and they bring it to me, and then I turn around, and I'm making up my coffee, putting some cream in there, and I hear my name. And I turn around, and I look back, and JD's standing between the two bathrooms. He's like, Paul, making like these military knife hands, like, come. I'm like, okay. So, I get my lid on my coffee, and I walk back there real quick. He's like, what's going on? He's like, someone's in the crapper in the men's room. I'm going in the women's. You watch the door. Okay. So then I stand there with my cup of coffee, and then as the ladies approach, I'm like, that room's busy. Somebody just went in there, and they asked me to watch the door, please, give it. Well, so JD, I mean, he literally like dives into this door, and I don't know what went on there, but my understanding that a lot went on there really fast, and he just got into the restroom, and things happened. A lot of pressure. Comes back to the door, and he opens it just a bit, and he says, hey. And I look back, and he's not wearing a shirt. At that time, Medco had given us these salmon colored shirts with kind of this bright Medco logo on it. We never saw that shirt again because that one was trash. We used it to kind of clean up the area. So I had to go out to the car. Unfortunately, I had his car keys, and I had to get him a new shirt out of the suitcase. So I got him a shirt. I come back in. He's in there another 10 minutes or so, and finally he comes out. And JD's like, and he's like the guy in Christmas Story that's down there fighting the furnace. He's like kind of cussing on.
Yeah.
He's really upset. And I'm like, oh my God, that was so funny what just happened, because it was. But I was like, I can never tell this story. I can never say this. That's embarrassing. My wife would be mortified, if I was out there telling that story about myself. So we get in the car, and JD, he gets back on the road, and he's cussing and cussing. And then he calls Carol and gets Carol on the phone, and he tells Carol the whole story. And JD's like, Carol's, JD, you can't tell that to anybody. That's terrible. That's awful. I can't believe you. He's just kind of dressing him down about this, and he's feeling bad. But then, he hangs up the phone and he starts giggling, just like that classic JD giggle. And then he gets that sparkle in his eye, like, hey, we got another appointment to go on. So we go into this tiny little high school with this gymnasium that's not even like a full court. I don't know. It's like half court basketball. Remember this. And we go in there, we meet with another one of these ADs that he's probably known. Brian was probably your dad. I don't know, but we go in there and we sit down, and we're not in those seats 12 seconds. And JD starts telling this guy about the McDonald's that he just went to.
Of course.
So, I mean, we make like 3 more stops on the way back to Muncie. At that point, hey, JD's going to tell this story. I may as well.
Exactly.
That's the famous McDonald's story. And I've never been back in that McDonald's since, by the way. I figure there's a picture up there somewhere.
So where did you eat pancakes at then? That started all this off.
It was too long ago.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll look. I'll see if I can figure it out, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
little podunk pancake place. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we've all been there. But,
okay. Yeah.
but I don't know if I would repeat the story. Several different people.
Yeah, there's a wanted poster out there for JD and I at McDonald's somewhere in Toledo. So be careful.
Yeah.
Hopefully they've gotten that mess cleaned up. They brought in the hazmat team.
Do you still have that Medco shirt just to break it out and laugh every now and then?
It might be in the attic, but I remember at a trade show, and everybody hated that because it was salmon, but it was pink, and we were mostly in, and nobody wanted to wear it. So it got around pretty quickly that JD had pitched that shirt, and then we kind of all pitched our shirts and never wore them again. So it all worked out probably the way it was supposed to.
I don't know what happened to mine. Maybe I crapped on it. I don't know. I pulled a JD. I'm sorry.
So I don't know if that varies any differently than the way JD used to tell it, but yeah.
It's pretty spot on. That's pretty spot on.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're gonna kind of wrap this up. But anything that you want to share, anything that you want to talk, just kind of mention here a little bit about. I mean, we've talked about JD and stuff, but anything in general that as your careers have gone on that have meant a lot to you, that you'd just like to share with everybody else on the podcast.
Ryan, you want to take that one, and then I'll go.
Sure. Well, obviously taking time to do this today was really great, Troy. Thanks for having us.
Oh yeah.
For me, it's really a celebration of, look, it's one thing to have a job. I feel like there's more to it than just, checking in and checking out. And the relationships that I've built are forever. These people in this industry have been very good to me, and I just consider them to be family. So not being a wordsmith here, I would just say, this industry overall and profession has been very good for me. and I feel like I have lifelong friends because of it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say friends as much as family at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be my takeaway from this.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
I think if in really, playing off of the JD theme, I mean, if you think about it, that's really what his life encompassed, and I told Carol that, just the way he talked about his family, he was engaged with his family, but he was able to maneuver, travel, juggle all those things. And that when you're on the road and you're trying to be out there in the field and be present, you have to have that good family network in order for this to even pull off. And, I've been blessed in that regard to see good mentors along the way, and maybe some people that I've learned how not to do things or how to do them. You kind of take that along the way. So
I think we were all blessed to be part of his family. It was he had his family and the girls and the grandkids that he all adored. And we all know that. I mean, especially the grandkids, he was at one event, or, I mean, there'd be times I tried, like, hey, let's go to lunch. I can't go to lunch. I'm doing this with I'm going to a volleyball game, or I'm doing this. But at the end of the day, he was still we were part of his family in that capacity. And I think one of the last things that we did together was go out to Philadelphia for the convention. And of course that was like riding in the car with you guys, he's telling jokes and doing stuff. And he's getting agitated because we're stopping for the fifth bar on the way there or something, like goodness sakes. I mean, and the one thing I and this is the first time we stopped in this bar in Morgantown, West Virginia, and he had this waitress just rolling. But by the time it was all said, he had her absolutely laughing, and to the point where she couldn't even concentrate. Like, she's trying to take our orders, she can't concentrate to take our orders. And finally, we just had to tell him, like, stop it. We got to get an order of food and get back on the road, Jim. Let's go. But I mean, it was those moments again. You felt like just what you talked about, Brian. We were in on something that a lot of people don't get to be in on, and right. We were blessed with that, and that's why doing these podcasts are important, because I want people to understand not only how special these people are, that we're doing, and that includes you guys, because you're a very special part of what we've been trying to do over the years there too. But to make sure that that other people down the line, obviously the internet's forever. And so if somebody wanted to look something up, they could, and hear that and do that. And that's what makes this really cool. And so I appreciate you guys doing this today. I know that and being a part of this, and always being a part of what we've been trying to do at Ball State. And there's going to come a day where we're not, I'm not going to be at Ball State. Neil's not going to be at Ball State anymore, but that's not going to change our relationship. And I think that's what's really cool about a lot of this, is that things evolve and change, but relationships don't have to. They can evolve and change too, but the core part of it is that we'll always have this shared experience because of Jim, and that's what has been a part of all of us, with that. So.
Yep.
So anything else?
Ball State really has a unique heritage and tradition. Brian and I both traveled tens of thousands of miles every year for 30 years. And I've been in a lot of different athletic training rooms, and Ball State is a special place.
Yeah.
I think it's really got an outsized position in athletic training, for the size of school it is and what have you. That Ring of Honor is special. Attending the meetings at the NATA for years, you don't see that at some of the big Penn schools. What happens there at the Ball State Ring of Honor ceremony and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's a really special place, and those of you that are privileged to be students there, it's just great location, and the people have been terrific to me throughout my career. It's been super important to me throughout my career. So I'm chirp proud, even though I'm not an athletic trainer, but feel like you guys have really brought me.
Well, you both are, and even we'll even throw Parrish in there since he's not on the podcast, but he is I guess a chirper too. So there you go.
Absolutely. Yeah,
But
I watched him play basketball. So
well, listen, thanks guys for being on the podcast. It was an awesome afternoon so far, and the appliance guy didn't call, so I guess I still got to wait a little bit longer. But anyway, we can hopefully carry this on amongst ourselves sooner than later, and still have a good time about it. So we've gone off the roll with Paul Calloway and Brian Matix. Thanks, guys.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank Paul and Brian for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate their perspective on what they see from athletic trainers. Obviously, relationships are incredibly important to not only doing business for them, but the relationships and friendships they build serving athletic trainers, and then what we get from them back is invaluable. And I truly appreciate them from that standpoint as well. They have personally pulled me out of a pinch every now and then with some things, and really contributed to wins and losses in an indirect fashion for what they do. If you like today's podcast, give us some feedback on off the roll podcast at gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on Facebook personally with some feedback on that. We really appreciate you listening. There's some other stuff coming up for the podcast as we kind of get back into the swing of things, and I really appreciate what I hear from all our listeners out there. So have a great day. Thanks for listening.